My name is Frank Calloway. I am 67 years old, and for the last 3 months, I have been sleeping on a pull-out couch in my own son's house. The house I put $1.4 million into, because my daughter-in-law decided my bedroom was better suited for a home office she has never once used. Last Tuesday, she sat across from me at the dinner table and told me, very calmly, very sweetly, that it was time for me to find somewhere else to be. My son said nothing. He just stared at his plate. I nodded, folded my napkin, and told them both that I understood completely. They had no idea I had already spoken to my attorney. They had no idea that by asking me to leave, they had just triggered Article 7 of the partnership agreement they signed and never bothered to read. An article that means they don't just lose a house guest. They lose everything. But I should start at the beginning, because this story does not begin with cruelty. It begins, as most of these stories do, with grief. My wife Carol passed away 8 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. We had 41 years together. Psst. And then we had 4 months of hospice care. And then we had nothing. She was the architect of our life. I built the house. Literally. In the sense that I spent 35 years as a civil engineer and then running my own home inspection business. But Carol built the home. She made it warm. She knew which of the neighbors' names to remember, which flowers came back every spring, which shelf in the pantry held the things we actually used versus the things we were saving for some occasion that never came. When she died, I walked through rooms I had lived in for 22 years and felt like a stranger. My son Kevin called me 2 weeks after the funeral. He and his wife Serena had been talking, he said. They were worried about me. The house was too big, too quiet, too full of reminders. They had a plan. Kevin was 39. He had spent most of his adult life chasing something he could never quite name. He'd had 4 jobs in 10 years. None of them bad. None of them right. Serena was 35, sharp and beautiful in the way that makes you forget she is also watching you very carefully. She had grown up outside of money and married into the edges of it, and she had never stopped calculating the distance between where she was and where she believed she deserved to be. Their plan was this. They had always dreamed of opening a restaurant. A real one. Not a franchise. Not a bar with a kitchen bolted on. A proper farm-to-table place in the Germantown neighborhood of Nashville. The kind of place that got written up in Southern Living and had a 3-week wait for a Saturday reservation. They had a location. They had a concept. They had passion and drive and vision. What they did not have was capital. I had just sold my inspection business for $2.1 million. I was sitting in a house full of my wife's things, with no idea how to fill my days. Kevin's voice on the phone was careful and warm, the voice he used when he wanted something but was trying not to sound like he did. "Dad," he said, "what if you came in with us? Not as a charity thing, not as a loan, as a real partner. You'd have a stake in something being built, something with your name attached to it. You could move in with us while the restaurant gets off the ground. The 3rd bedroom is just sitting there. You wouldn't be alone. I want you to understand something. I am not a naive man. I spent 35 years in a business where trusting the wrong contractor's word could cost someone their home. I have read more fine print than most people have read novels. I know what a handshake means and what it is worth and when you need more than a handshake. But I was 8 weeks out from burying my wife. I was 67 years old, and I was genuinely, terrifyingly, alone. And Kevin was my son. The boy I drove to baseball practice and helped with his college applications and sat up with until 2 in the morning when his first serious girlfriend broke his heart. When someone you love offers you a rope, sometimes you grab it without looking at where the other end is tied. I called my attorney first. That part I did right. Howard Gaines had handled my business contracts for 20 years. He was the kind of lawyer who wore short-sleeved dress shirts and always looked slightly disappointed in the world, which made him excellent at anticipating ways things could go wrong. "Howard," I told him, "I want to do this, but I want to do it right." He drafted the partnership agreement himself. I sat in his office for 2 hours going line by line. Kevin and Serena would retain operational control. They would handle day-to-day management, Hiring, menus, the public face of the business. My 1.4 million would cover construction, equipment, and the first year of operating costs. I would be listed as founding partner and silent investor, with a 15% share of profits. And then there was Article 7. Howard had flagged it himself. Unprompted. "Frank," he said, sliding a page across his desk. "This is the one I want you to read carefully. It's called a financial misconduct clause. If at any point either operating partner engages in documented financial misconduct, which includes unauthorized transfers, commingling of funds, or misrepresentation of accounts, the silent partner retains the right to demand an immediate audit, assume full controlling interest, and require a buyout at fair market value within 60 days. I had looked at the page for a long time. Kevin and Serena were family, I said. Howard had given me the flat, patient look of a man who had seen this movie before. "Then they'll never need to worry about it," he said. "Sign it anyway." Kevin and Serena signed without hesitation, which told me either they trusted me completely or they hadn't read it, and I told myself it was the former. That was 7 months ago. The restaurant opened 4 months after I moved in. It was called Fieldstone, and it was genuinely beautiful. Exposed brick, local ceramics, a menu that changed every 6 weeks. Serena had real taste. I will give her that. She had an eye for the right detail. The opening night was full, and I sat at a corner table with a glass of wine and felt something close to pride and something close to hope. And I thought maybe this was going to be all right. But houses settle, and so do people. And within a few months of moving in, I began to see the hairline cracks. Serena had been warm when I arrived, welcoming, even. She had set up the 3rd bedroom with fresh linens and a small chair by the window and a framed photograph of Carol and me that she'd found somewhere and had reprinted and matted herself. I thought it was kind. Now I understand it was investment protection. Now I understand that warmth was a performance staged specifically for the person holding the checkbook. Once Fieldstone opened and my money was in the walls, the warmth began to cool. It was small at first. The way she would finish a sentence directed at Kevin before I had a chance to join the conversation. The way she scheduled dinner reservations for the 2 of them without mentioning it until I had already started cooking for 3. The way my bathroom counter gradually accumulated her overflow products. My toiletries nudged further and further to one end until they were essentially stacked against the wall. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was an old man in a new house, grieving a dead wife and reading too much into the small adjustments of shared living. Then 4 months ago, she asked me to move to the couch. Kevin brought it up, which meant Serena had decided Kevin would bring it up. His face had the particular expression of a man reciting lines he has not written. "Dad," he said, sitting across from me in the kitchen. "Serena has been really struggling with the commute between the house and the restaurant. She needs a space here where she can do the bookkeeping, take vendor calls, that kind of thing. It would just be for a little while, just until we can sort out a proper office setup at the restaurant." I looked at him for a long moment. "My bedroom," I said. He nodded. "The pull-out in the living room is actually really comfortable," he said. "We just had it reupholstered." I thought about Carol. I thought about the framed photograph Serena had put in that room, now apparently not worth preserving for its subject. I thought about Article 7. I thought about $1.4 million. I said, all right. I pulled out the couch and I slept on it that night and the night after that and for the next 91 nights, and I watched Serena turn my room into something that was not an office. There was no desk, no filing cabinet, no vendor call setup. There was a yoga mat, a Peloton bicycle she used 4 times, and a wall-mounted television set to a home design channel. It was a retreat. It was a room for Serena to go to when she wanted to be away from the house without leaving it. I did not say anything. I watched. I am a civil engineer. My entire career was built on the principle that you cannot fix a problem you have not fully understood. You do not tear out the wall until you know what is behind it. I had learned by then that something was wrong, not just with the bedroom arrangement but with the restaurant. I just did not know how wrong. I started paying attention to the numbers. Kevin handled the public side of Fieldstone, the staff, the floor, the relationships with farmers and suppliers. Serena handled the money. She had set up the accounting software herself and had access to all the accounts. As a partner, I was entitled to monthly reports, and I received them. But they were the kind of reports that answer the questions you asked, without ever volunteering the ones you should have. For the first few months, the numbers looked reasonable for a new restaurant. Costs high. Revenue building. Nothing alarming. Then, I started noticing small things. A vendor invoice repeated in 2 different monthly reports. A line item for equipment maintenance that seemed high for the age of the kitchen. A transfer category labeled administrative overhead that grew by $4,000 between October and November, with no corresponding change in operations. I am not an accountant, but I spent 35 years running a business, which means I am fluent in the language of money quietly disappearing. Then, one Saturday evening, I woke up at 2 in the morning with a dry throat. The pull-out mattress was predictably miserable, and my back had been complaining for weeks. I got up in the dark and made my way toward the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was still. I could see a faint glow coming from down the hall, the thin line of light under the door to what used to be my bedroom. I stopped. It was 2 in the morning on a Saturday. The restaurant was closed Sundays. I heard her voice, low and quick, the sound of someone who believes they are alone. I stood in the hallway, and I listened. She was on the phone. A business call at 2 in the morning had a specific quality, a specific tone. It did not sound like a conversation between partners. It was too comfortable, too familiar, with stretches of soft laughter between the business. I heard her say the account is right where we need it. I heard her say, Kevin doesn't look at the transfers. He never has. I heard her say 3 more months, maybe 4, and we're in a position to move. And then I heard her laugh, a sound I had heard before downstairs at the restaurant when she was charming a supplier. All lightness and ease. The laugh of someone who is completely in control of a situation. I walked back to my couch. I lay down in the dark, and I stared at the ceiling, and I did not sleep. In the morning, I was the same Frank Calloway who folded his napkin quietly and said he understood completely, and shuffled off to his pull-out couch like a good old man who knew his place. I made coffee. I asked Kevin if he wanted eggs. He said sure, and Serena came out and said good morning in her breezy voice, and I smiled and said good morning back, and nobody would have known that anything had changed. But I am a civil engineer, and when I find a crack, I do not look away. I follow it until I understand where it goes and what it is going to bring down. That afternoon, while Kevin was at the restaurant for inventory and Serena was at a yoga class, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and I logged into the partnership portal with my own access credentials, the ones I had insisted Howard include in the agreement. I did not look at the summary reports Serena prepared. I went to the raw transaction records. It took me 40 minutes to find it. When I found it, I sat very still for a long time. There were 43 separate transfers over 9 months, each one small enough to avoid triggering an automatic alert, none of them larger than $4,000. They were distributed across 3 vendor categories, each of which corresponded to real vendors who were paid their real invoices. But the amounts in the ledger exceeded the invoices by precise round numbers. The excess had been routed to a secondary account I had never seen referenced in any report. Over 9 months, the total was $68,000. $68,000 that had walked quietly out of the partnership I had funded and into an account with a routing number I did not recognize. I printed everything. I used Kevin's home printer, which felt strange, standing in his house printing evidence against his wife. I put the pages in a manila envelope, and I drove to a FedEx store, and I mailed them to Howard's office with a note that said, Article 7. Call me when you have reviewed this. Howard called me the next morning at 7:15. I could tell by the hour that he had been thinking about it overnight. Frank, he said, and his voice had the quality of a man choosing his words with the care of someone diffusing something. This is not ambiguous. Tell me what we're looking at, I said. Systematic misappropriation of partnership funds. 68,000 confirmed. Possibly more in categories I haven't fully traced yet. This is not a bookkeeping error. This is documented financial misconduct under the exact language of Article 7. You have the right to invoke it immediately. I sat with that for a moment. If I invoke it now, what happens? Howard walked me through it. The partnership agreement would be suspended pending audit. Serena would lose access to the accounts. I would assume controlling interest. They would have 60 days to arrange a buyout at fair market value, meaning the value of the restaurant as a going concern, not the original investment, which at this point, given the brand equity Fieldstone had built in 9 months, was likely considerably more than what I had put in. But there was a second part of the conversation. I don't want to do it today, I told him. Not yet. Howard was quiet for a moment. Frank, why not? You have everything you need. Because $68,000 doesn't explain 2 a.m. phone calls about moving somewhere in 4 months. That's not just embezzlement. That's an exit. She's building a runway. I want to know where that runway leads, and who's at the other end of it. Another pause. He sighed the sigh of a man who respected what I was saying, while also worrying about me. All right, he said. But Frank, document everything. Every conversation. Every observation, and do not let them know what you know. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the FedEx parking lot for a while. I thought about Carol. She had always been the one who saw people clearly. I had a tendency to take people at the face they showed me, a flaw she balanced with a gift for reading the face underneath. She would have seen Serena in the first month. She would have touched my arm and said something quiet and knowing, and I would have argued with her. And she would have turned out to be right, as she so often was. I pressed my palm flat against the passenger seat where she used to sit. I missed her, with a force that was almost physical. Then I straightened up and drove home. I spent the next week watching. I watched Serena at dinner, the way she deflected Kevin's questions about certain vendors with vague answers and an arm on his shoulder. I watched the way she took calls in her room, the former office that had never been an office. Door closed. I watched Kevin, who was tired and optimistic, and working hard and in love with his wife, and completely blind to the thing that was happening around him. And then on a Wednesday evening, Kevin had an event at the restaurant, a private buyout dinner that ran late, and Serena told me she was going to visit a friend. She left at 7 with a bag over her shoulder, the kind of bag you take when you are staying somewhere. She came back at 11. I was on the couch with the lights low, reading. And she did not see me until she had already walked past. She startled. Then she composed herself in the way she always did. Instantly. Completely. Good book? She said. I smiled. Good enough, I said. She went to her room. I listened to the shower run for a long time. The next morning I drove to a surveillance equipment store. I am aware of how that sounds. I am aware that what I did next is the kind of thing you justify carefully and examine from multiple angles before you do it. I examined it. My name was on a partnership agreement being systematically stolen from. My money was funding a lifestyle and an exit that I was not supposed to know about. I was sleeping on a reupholstered couch while the woman doing this slept in my room. I bought a small audio recorder, the kind that looks like a USB drive, and I placed it in the bookcase in the living room, behind a row of cookbooks Carol had given Kevin years ago that had never been opened. I set it to voice activated. I went for a long drive. I did not have to wait long. On Friday afternoon, I came home from a walk to find Kevin and Serena in the living room, in the middle of a conversation that stopped when I walked in. Kevin looked uncomfortable. Serena looked composed in a way that meant she had been composing herself for the last few seconds. She said they needed to talk to me. I sat down across from them. I was the picture of a cooperative old man. I have been practicing that picture for months. The restaurant is doing well, Serena began. Really well, better than either of us projected. She smiled. Frank, you made that possible, and we want you to know how much we appreciate it. I waited. Kevin, she prompted, with the smallest tilt of her head. Kevin cleared his throat. Dad, he said. The thing is, with Fieldstone doing as well as it is, Serena and I have been looking at some opportunities. Expanding. A second location, maybe in Brentwood. But to do that, we'd need to restructure the partnership a little. Bring in a new investor. Someone with restaurant industry experience who could really help us scale. I see, I said. And we were thinking, Serena said, picking up where she had left off with the seamless coordination of two people who have rehearsed this, that maybe the best thing for everyone would be for you to step back from the partnership. A buyout. We'd pay you back your original investment. All 1.4 million. Clean. And you'd be free to do whatever you want. Travel. Spend time with friends. You've more than done your part. She smiled at me with everything she had. And as for living arrangements, she continued, obviously, you'd want your own space at that point. Your own place. We could help you find something wonderful. A nice condo, somewhere closer to your friends. There it was. The original investment back. No profit. No appreciation for what the brand had become. And a door. A very politely held open door. Pointed toward the exit. I looked at Kevin. He was doing the thing he always did. Looking at the middle distance. Leaving the room without leaving the room. I nodded slowly. I understand, I said. Let me think about it. Serena blinked. She had expected gratitude. She had expected relief. A clueless old man handed a graceful exit. She recovered quickly. Of course, she said. Take all the time you need. That night, after they were asleep, I retrieved the recorder from behind the cookbooks. I plugged it into my laptop in the dark, on my couch, with a single earbud in. The first 40 minutes were ordinary household sounds, and then I found the recording from 2 hours before I had come home on Friday. The tail end of the conversation I had interrupted. Kevin's voice first. I don't know, Serena. It doesn't feel right. He put in the money. He trusted us. Serena's voice. Patient. The way you are patient. With someone whose patience you are running out of. Kevin. He gets his money back. Every dollar. That is completely fair. But the restaurant is worth more than that now. He's a partner. He's entitled to what the agreement says he's entitled to, she said. And her voice had an edge now. The edge I had heard through the door at 2 a.m. And the agreement says we can propose a buyout at original investment value if both parties agree. If he agrees, it's done. It's legal. He's 67 years old and he just lost his wife. He has no idea what the business is actually worth right now. I know, she said simply. That's the point. A silence. Kevin's voice again, quieter. And Marcus? Are you sure about Marcus? She laughed softly. Marcus has 3 restaurants in Scottsdale. He knows what he's doing. And he has the kind of money we need to make this what it could be. But you and Marcus. You, Kevin, she said. And her voice was firm now. The way you speak to a child who is asking about something they do not fully understand. Marcus is a business partner. That's all he needs to be. The recording ended. I sat on my couch in the dark for a long time. Marcus, a restaurant investor in Scottsdale. The phone calls at 2 a.m. The bag she took to visit a friend. The runway she was building, 3 or 4 months, ready to move. I thought about Kevin. His voice on the recording had been the voice of a man who suspects something but cannot bring himself to look directly at it. He was asking the question he needed to ask and accepting the answer that let him not know the thing he didn't want to know. I thought about how to do what I was about to do in a way that was honest. Not kind, necessarily, but honest. I called Howard from the parking lot of a grocery store the next morning. Howard, I said, I'm ready. But I want to do one thing first. I want Kevin to understand what he's part of before the papers land. Howard was quiet. Frank, in my professional opinion, I know, I said. Do it my way. Draft everything. Have it ready. I'll call you. I went home. Kevin was at the restaurant. Serena was in her room. On her phone. I went to the couch, and I sat down, and I opened the audio file on my laptop, and I split it into 2 parts. The part about the buyout and the value of the restaurant, and the part about Marcus. I put the second part into a text message to Kevin. I typed 3 words above it. I need you to listen to this. And then, I sent it. Then I put on my jacket, picked up my car keys, and drove to a hotel downtown. I checked in for 3 nights. I ordered a club sandwich from room service. I turned on the television and watched 2 hours of a nature documentary about tide pools. My phone rang at 9:47 that evening. Kevin. I let it ring twice before I answered. Dad. His voice was different. It was the voice of a man who has been standing in the same room with a gas leak for months and has just now smelled it. His voice was stripped of everything but the raw confusion and the beginning of an anger he did not yet know how to direct. Dad, what is this? What is this recording? I told him where I found it. I told him about the recorder in the bookcase. I told him I had listened to it and I had needed him to hear it too. He was quiet for a long time. Then, is there more? I told him about the transfers. I told him about the $68,000. I told him I had sent everything to my attorney weeks ago. I told him about Article 7. I mended the cinching. And Presley, I heard him exhale. It was a long, slow, deflating sound. The sound of a man's certainty, leaving him all at once. She's been, this whole time she's been. Kevin, I said, listen to me. The restaurant is real. What you built there is real. The food is good. The staff is good. The name means something. That part she did not fake because she couldn't. You both made something real. But everything else, he said. His voice cracked on the last word. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. I know, I said. Dad. He stopped. Started again. Dad, did you know when you put in the money? Did you know she was like this? No, I said. I didn't know. I suspected something was off, but I didn't know what it was. Not until recently. He was silent for a moment. Then, quietly, I thought she loved me. I didn't say anything to that. I couldn't fix it and I didn't try to. I just let it sit there with him. The way grief sits. Eventually he said, "What happens now?" I told him. Howard would file the Article 7 invocation in the morning. Serena's access to the partnership accounts would be suspended, pending audit. The 60-day buyout clock would begin. As the assumed controlling partner, I would have authority over the restaurant operations during that period. And her? Kevin said. That depends on what she does, I said. If she cooperates with the audit, the missing funds become a civil matter. If she doesn't, Howard has contacts at the DA's office who handle financial fraud. Either way, she no longer has access to anything in that partnership. There was a long silence. What about the house? Kevin said, and his voice was smaller now. It's in our names. I know, I said. Dad, if she fights the divorce, I might lose it. I know that too, I said. I listened to his breathing on the other end of the line. Then I said, I'm at the Lowe's downtown. There's a second bed in my room. Come, if you need somewhere to be tonight. Another long pause. He came. He knocked on my door at 11:30 with a duffel bag and the look of someone who had been driving around for 2 hours before deciding to actually arrive. We didn't talk much. He sat on the other bed and stared at the ceiling, and I turned the television volume down, and we stayed like that for a while. 2 men in a hotel room with the city lights coming in around the curtains. At some point, he said, I kept telling myself she was just ambitious. I thought ambitious was good. Ambition is good, I said. What she had was different. He nodded. After a while, he said, I'm sorry about your room, Dad. I'm sorry about the couch. I should have said something. I knew it wasn't right. I looked at my son. He was 39 years old, and he looked like he was 12. He looked like the boy who had stayed up too late working on a school project and finally admitted he needed help. I know you did, I said. Howard filed the invocation at 9 the next morning. Serena was served at the house at 11. Kevin told me later that she had stared at the papers for a long time without speaking, which was how he knew it was real. The woman who always had an answer had no answer for Article 7. She had signed it and not read it, and that signature was now the wall she had walked directly into. She left that afternoon. She took her car and 4 bags and the copper cookware she had insisted on for the restaurant and had kept at the house. She did not take the framed photograph of Carol and me from the bedroom doorway. She left it sitting on the floor in the hallway, propped against the baseboard. Kevin picked it up. He held it for a long time before he put it back where it had been. The audit took 6 weeks. The final number was $81,000. Howard referred the case to the district attorney's financial crimes unit. Marcus, the restaurant investor in Scottsdale, turned out to be a real person with 3 real restaurants and a real investment interest in Fieldstone. Whether there was more to it than that, I could not say with certainty, and I did not need to. That was Kevin's grief to carry and work through, not mine. At the 60-day mark, the restaurant underwent a formal valuation. It came in at $2.3 million, which told me that the 9 months of work and the $1.4 million had grown into something genuinely worth having. Howard negotiated a settlement structure that returned my original investment, plus a fair share of the appreciated value, which worked out to considerably more than the clean buyout Serena had proposed. I did not take all of it. I took enough to make myself whole. And then I offered Kevin the option to assume my interest in the partnership at a deferred payment schedule he could actually afford, because Fieldstone was his. Whatever else had happened, it was his work and his name and his regulars who came back every week and asked for the same table. He accepted. He looked at me like he could not understand why I was doing it, which told me how far he had drifted from knowing who I was. 3 months later, I bought a house. Not a grand gesture, like a glass fortress. Nothing designed to announce anything. A small craftsman bungalow in East Nashville. Walking distance to a farmer's market and a decent hardware store. With a back porch that gets the afternoon sun and a yard where I planted roses. Not Carol's variety, a different one. Something that was mine. Kevin comes for dinner on Sundays. He comes in the front door and sets the wine on the kitchen counter and sits at the island while I cook, and we talk the way we talked when he was in his 20s and hadn't yet learned to edit himself around me. He looks thinner than he used to. He looks older in the right ways, the ways that come from taking something seriously. One Sunday in October, he stood on my back porch with a glass of wine and looked at the roses for a while without saying anything. Then he said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't had Article 7? I thought about it. Howard would have negotiated something," I said. "I would not have been completely unprotected, but you were better protected because of it," Kevin said. "Yes," I said. "I was." He nodded slowly, looking at the roses. "Mom would have liked this yard," he said. "She would have changed everything about it within a week," I said, and he laughed, and it was the right kind of laugh, the kind that comes from a true thing. I am telling you this story not because it ends perfectly, because it does not. My son lost his marriage and his trust in someone he loved in 8 months of his life to a woman who was counting inventory in his heart from the first day she walked in. That is a real loss. It does not disappear because the legal outcome was favorable. I am telling you because I want you to understand something about the moment I signed that partnership agreement. I did not sign Article 7 because I believed Kevin would betray me. I signed it because I was a 67-year-old widower handing his children his retirement. And I had spent 35 years learning that the structures that protect us are not insults to the people we love. They are gifts to the future. To the version of events we hope will never happen, but cannot afford to be unprepared for. I was called a fool by more than one person during this. An old man who trusted his son's wife with his savings. Maybe. But this old man put Article 7 in the contract. And this old man listened through the door at 2 a.m. instead of going back to his pull-out couch. And this old man made copies of everything before he made a single phone call. They thought I was just the investor. The quiet old widower on the couch who didn't understand what the accounts actually said. They thought grief had made me soft. Grief made me many things. It did not make me stupid. So, let me ask you this, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Was I right to give Kevin back the restaurant After everything he allowed to happen, after the couch, after the bedroom, after staying quiet while his wife walked me out of the life I had built, was that forgiveness too easy? Or was it the only way to save what was left of my son? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one. And if this story stayed with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because there is more to come.